Hey everyone, Nexus here. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am just waiting for my fellow playwright Sisi to join me, and then we'll get this started. Hope everyone's been having a good week so far. And here. What happened this time?
My phone fell. Hold on. Wait, this is literally, we got to keep it real, y'all.
Uh-huh.
Don't have all the gadgets and gadgets. So I'm setting it up how best I can, and my phone just completely wanted to fall down. Okay. Oh, hold on. I still got to get situated. And can I come back? Can I just,
Yeah, yeah. Come on back.
do I just exit? Do I just, okay.
I think so.
Okay.
Hey everyone. Happy, what is today? Tuesday? Uh, Gonna give Cece a moment to jump back in here, and then we're gonna get this started.
Okay. Hello.
Yeah.
I see my brother. Hello, babe. I'm not the
Um,
freedom.
Cece, do you wanna kick us off with what were we talking about? Just like a little reintroduction about who the Welders is and what we do.
Hello, y'all. So my name is Cece. My pronouns are she, her. So we are the Welders. We are a playwrights collective. Yes, a playwrights collective based in Washington, D.C. And so we co-operate as a collective and co-lead this organization. As the six of us, we have four other fellow co-welder playwrights. And so we each take a turn producing our own original work, original play, theater piece, really exploring and expanding the form of theater. And then in about 3 to 4 years, each group passes on to a next generation of welders. So we are the third generation of welders, and the organization has been around for about 8 years. So, yeah,
Yep.
that's
Third time's the charm.
yes.
No, I love the other cohorts too.
No, it's a magical number. It's a magical number. I uplift that. Yes,
Yeah. Yeah, and hey everyone, my name is Nexus. My pronouns are he and his. And then, yeah, we're here in BC, the traditional land of the Pamunkey and Piscataway, and I've actually lived here my entire life, as have half of the welders in the area. And so, yeah, we're just going to be talking about what's coming up in 2022, specifically with my show. Working title is Crossroads, Detours, and Exits. Originally just Crossroads, but the others seem to have some kind of like meaning that I wanted to lean into. So, Cece, do you have any questions for me?
of course I do. I'm so excited to see people in the room, in the space. So
Oh, yeah, do you
welcome.
want to say hi to anyone?
Um, yes, I see my brother. He says, "What's up? What's up?" Which is cool. Yes, I see some folks. Yeah, I would love to hear about your evolution as an artist. What are the different mediums that you've trained in, explored? Um, see my brother. My brother's a pilot. All right, I'll see you. Um, what are the different mediums and pl- spaces that you've trained in as an artist, and what has been your evolution? If you could give us like a snapshot or deep dive into just the different places you've explored and trained in as an artist.
Sure, sure. So I originally started as a pianist when I was like a little itty bitty elementary, middle school kid. As soon as my mom could get me up on that piano bench, she had me taking piano lessons and eventually organ lessons too. And so music's been a real critical part of my life and creative life and expression in general. In fifth grade, I started singing professionally, actually, as a boy soprano at the National Cathedral Choir here in Washington, D.C., the boys' choir. Um, and normally, the sopranos were from like fifth to eighth grade, but apparently in eighth grade, I started like making my way to becoming a bass sooner than high school. So I wasn't singing soprano anymore. But yeah, one thing that was really neat about it too, because it was in in the context of this institutional and religious kind of organization, It was very much like music as ceremony, music as ritual. Um, my mom raised me Catholic, but this was an Episcopal church. But it was being in the National Cathedral. We also had really kind of intense and ceremonies of note. For example, in sixth grade in 1992, 93, I should remember the year. I actually sang at Thurgood Marshall's funeral, which I had no idea what that moment was about, right, when I was a kid, and we'll probably talk about that later. So singing, and then when I wasn't singing as a soprano anymore in high school, I discovered theater. Originally as a techie, actually, I didn't want to be on stage. If I wasn't singing, I was like, I don't know what to do. And then I auditioned for a musical, and turns out I knew how to dance okay compared to like most of the other guys in this all boys school. And so singing, dancing, tech. And then really more dancing in college. So music, theater, dance, um, but then storytelling. So that might, I don't know. Should I keep going?
Yes, please. Yes. How do all these pathways lead to
Yeah,
storytelling?
yeah. So let me pause. So I didn't go into dance directly after high school. I initially went to GW and decided to be a dramatic literature major because that sounded practical. I have no idea why. um, but I also got diagnosed as an adult with ADHD, and my performance in college just kind of plummeted. Executive dysfunction was real. I didn't have the language for it then. I had tried Ritalin or Adderall, but didn't. I needed to work on something else other than like just a chemical imbalance. I wanted to figure some other stuff out, so I decided to take a break from school. And so the reason dance became the thing I went to is for the year that I took off when I was just working retail, I would find myself going out at least once a weekend to some of the local rave clubs in the DC area, specifically Nation,
Yeah.
and dancing. Again, it was kind of that communal thing. It was almost ceremonial. It was just something that kept me going. I kept looking forward to seeing my friends on the dance floor and just expressing ourselves, even though I had taken no formal classes. And at some point, a friend was like, "Hey, I take dance classes. Do you want to join me?" And I said, "Sure." And I was like, "Oh, I could study this." And because it was like in my body, it was another way I realized I could like focus, and it was the thing that got me back to college, actually.
Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. That's wow.
yeah, it was. And we went to Maryland. I graduated in 2006, and I auditioned. I did the thing you do when you finish college as a performing arts major, but I stayed in DC. A lot of my friends went to New York or other places, but growing up in the area, I really wanted to like stay committed to the local performing arts scene and community. And so I would audition. I'd get into some dance companies. I'd perform in some musicals and light operas, but I also still like returned to being a tech person. At some point, I was a production manager at Adventure Theater for a year, and I found my way into arts management. So part of this, I didn't even realize why I started shifting until really the past couple of years.
Mm.
Um, as I as I found I wasn't a competitive performer in auditions for whatever reason, at least that's the like internal monologue I had. I remember I did this one 2-week intensive with Signature Theater in 2007, and there's this one audition workshop, and the guest teaching artist who came in to give feedback. I don't remember anything she said about my performance. The thing I remembered was her saying, "Oh, when you came out, like I was expecting this and this and this because you're the strapping young man and da 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 da." And I was like, "Oh, like I thought she was really gassing me up." And then she was like, "And then you opened your mouth," and I could just like feel this disappointment, like the way I sounded didn't line up with the way she thought I should have sounded based on how I looked. And all of a sudden, and again, I'm just unpacking this for the first time, what,
Right.
over a decade later? Like that internalized, what, am I not black enough? Do I sound too gay? Am I too effeminate? Like all these things about like how I sound and my lateral lisp and all these other things. I didn't realize how much that really affected my confidence in acting and performing, and how on some level I take pride in being a strong ensemble member. Period. I love being in the ensemble. I love supporting other people doing their thing. But I think it really made me feel like if I can't do anything about the way I sound, I'm I shouldn't expect to make a living in this business. And I'm not one who's ever been good with voices or accents. I know that's something I could take time to do. But for whatever reason, I just took the opportunities I had, and that led me more into production and arts management. And so I was a Capitol Fringe one year, and I met this artist, this theater performer and storyteller. He's no longer with us, John Kevin Boggs.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Hey," he saw a show that I had, like, it was a devised ensemble piece, and he was like, "Hey, I think you might like this thing that I do. It's storytelling." I was like, "Ooh." And so he brought me to a story district show, which was called Speakeasy at the time, and I was just like, "This is fascinating and terrifying because all it is a person on stage with a mic telling a true story about themselves for 7 to 8 minutes." And these aren't most of them aren't professional performers. They're just people who have the support. Um, and I decided to sign up and do it, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever done. Again, strong ensemble member, very good with like choreography and music and lyrics, to solo person talking about themselves. And it was one of those things where I was worried that I wasn't enough, or I wasn't black enough, or I wasn't like manly enough, or whatever, for whoever was auditioning me. I found out that I was not just enough, I was more than enough,
Yeah.
exactly the way I was. And
Yes.
so I ended up telling multiple stories on that stage. I ended up doing a storytelling project with local burners. I ended up taking storytellers from DC to Burning Man to do storytelling. And so all that is to say, the show in May is going to be a one-man show, my first one-man show, sharing true stories about my life here in the district.
Wow. Wow. I appreciate, thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for letting us in, right? And into the life experiences that I'm sure we'll hear about, but maybe there's things we won't hear about in your show. And I like that you are like shining a light. And I know for those who are actors, for those who audition for their industries, just shining a light on just how oppressive the auditioning and how um, dis- destructive it can feel for us as performers, entertainers, actors, story. So I appreciate you because it's very real and it's very current, and it makes me also feel very sad because I meet people who are in other fields or maybe community organizers or do other industries, and they have a story of when someone made them feel like they weren't good enough because of their body size, abilities, color of skin to be on stage, and it breaks my heart because there's people that probably still would be doing their craft as a hobby or professionally, but yeah, just the way that
Yeah.
it tears you down. So I appreciate you like talking about that because I think of the things that I share about as an artist, as a human. I don't think I talk about the experiences I had in undergrad and professionally where it was like, yeah, I also came up against that real internalized oppressions that are in our industry. Yeah.
Well, and that feedback I got in the audition, right? It's stuff that and I'm sure you and others encounter in our everyday life, like as a queer Black and Filipino person. Even 3 weeks ago, I get in a Lyft to come home. My driver appears to be Black as well.
Mm-hmm.
I remember getting in, and I don't know how we got on this topic. I was just like, I'm so glad we have these kind of services because it used to be so hard for me to catch a cab. And I shared a story about how some friends had to like not only hail down a cab in Georgetown like a decade ago, but then had to stop in front of it to keep it from driving away. And this, he
Ooh.
was like, I've never heard a white person share a story like that before. And I was just like, are you talking about me? I'm not white. And he was like, oh, it was dark. I didn't see you get in. And I was just like,
Oh
are
wow.
you kidding me? So it's just like this internalized like what people are supposed to sound like based on how they look, or what they're supposed to look like based on how they sound. It's just like even though that happened back in 2007, it's like every now and then I'm reminded that it comes from everywhere. We've all internalized different parts of like this, right? I was
Yeah.
like but I was like, I understand. It was dark. You weren't looking. Now you know. Let's move on.
Wow. And just to I have so many thoughts. Just to say, I mean, wow, just to say the assumption also is a different type of boldness and rather than be like, oh, what, like, where are you from, or
Yeah.
any of the questions to figure out what a person is.
And you know the story's going in my show.
Do it, but like, wow, that what I'm curious as you keep hitting on this, like what I'm supposed to sound like as a singer, as a musical theater performer, what I'm supposed to sound like, the cab story. Where does that live? Where do those three experiences and that like that that expectation, that oppressive expectation that's put upon you, where does that exist in your show? Are you exploring that visually? Are you exploring that in certain stories that you're including in your show about how your sound, your voice?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to even something trying to figure out which memory to anchor in my response right now because I kind of jokingly say, well, I went to predominantly white school as if like that's why I sound like this. But
Mm.
even that's messed up, right? I shouldn't even like that's not even anything to say because that this isn't me sounding white. This is just me talking the way I talk. I even here, the way it's going to come up is like other instances like that. I remember one time, and it wasn't as bad as this driver. It was my freshman year at GW in 1999, 2000. And I remember I went to Howard University. This might be part of the show you're going to see. So you're getting a preview. Um, and I went to Howard University because they were doing a tribute to black musicals. And I remember in the audience, I was there by myself. There were student ushers, and I'm talking to a student usher who's, I will say, is a female passing, but I'll say they. And so I'm talking to them, and we're having that like what I feel like was a typical freshman year conversation, like where are you from, like what are you majoring in, all this stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm from DC, and they were like, oh, really? And gave me this look. I was like, yeah, why? They were just like, oh, I thought you were from somewhere else. I said, where? They
Mm.
said California, and I asked why, and they said because you talk properly.
Mm.
So like,
Mm.
it wasn't racing here. It was like either a regional thing or maybe even a class thing that they weren't even like talking about because they were like, you don't sound like you're from DC,
Yeah.
right? I even had another guy say that one time on the streets in U Street, but I won't get. So I think that's going to be one element to it.
Yeah.
But you asking that, I wonder if part of why I loved storytelling
Mm-hmm.
because not that I was hiding behind singing. There's
Mm.
just a certain consistency in singing in terms of like producing a tone and especially singing an ensemble and a chorus and sounding good together, right? And there was a certain security and safety there. And I think I never really got to know my own voice until
Mm.
storytelling. Like even in musicals or like the only other non-musical shows I would do would
Yeah.
be like a couple of shows with Cinetic, where again it's a movement theater, so I didn't have to worry about this.
Yeah.
So I think that idea of this detour, right, away from singing and dancing and acting to just sharing the truth of my story, is part of what I'm going to be exploring, but also what that means. Like, am I enough? Because something, for those who have been following the descriptions of the show, part of my piece was going to be an ensemble piece too. I was going to have like a solo storytelling half and then an ensemble piece. But for various reasons, which we can talk about, anything from like budget to just like where we are and coming back in person and where I think we are in May and what feels responsible, not just for me and my production, but also for the welders. Um, I decided to just stick to the solo storytelling show, and I couldn't help but wonder if part of me was putting in the ensemble piece because I was worried I wasn't going to be enough.
That resonates. That resonates. I'm gonna respond, but I want to shout out some folks if they're still in the room. I see Timadayo is here or was here. Hey Timadayo, Irie. But thank y'all for being here. I wanted to make sure I showed some love and said, hey. That resonates because I'm also working on my solo show. And at some point I was like, I need people. I need um and I might do something with people's voices because sound is cool. But I also have to come back to like Cece, just go back to yourself. Like just So but I'm curious because you mentioned the production side. So we are producing playwrights, and I'm personally continually learning what that means because I've never, I don't know if it's never, but I'm in my first experience of creating the show, writing it, I'm going to act it, and then also produce it. So I would like you to talk about what has been your journey so far, and you already touched upon it a little bit, of producing your own solo show. So not only are you creating it, writing it, and are the main storyteller, but you are also producer. So what does that mean? What has that been looking like so far in terms of what you have to like think about and juggle? I'd love for you to talk about that.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the first things with my production hat on that I really interrogated was where did I want to do this show? And there wasn't necessarily a moment where it clicked, but at some point I realized I didn't want to do this in established theater space. I didn't want to do this in a brick and mortar theater. I wanted to find other venues, whether they be community centers or kind of looking at some of the open mic spaces in the area, including like some of the spaces at like Busboys and Poets or Bloom Bars. So there was a certain freedom, honestly, that came from cutting off the ensemble part of it. That also allowed me to really focus on like the thing I wanted to explore as a welder was storytelling as a playwriting lens, right? Not to say that other playwrights don't tell stories as well, but specifically my storytelling experience. How can I take this then and actually like turn it into a script? Because the times I've done story telling have one been like 7, 8, 9 minutes, but also kind of threaded the needle between improv and like an outline script. So I generally knew what I was going to say, but there will still be some room for like in the moment ad libs. But I really want to focus on like how can I actually like script this out into a full length evening. So production wise, I'm really focusing on exploring, and this actually came out of some conversations with like Theater Washington and Helen Hayes Awards, and is that something I'm even worried about? And at some point I said no. And so for once I realized that, I was like, oh, I don't even have to do a run in a single venue. And this is something that I certainly don't take credit for. Someone in our community during the latest virtual theater Washington Summit had put it out there, and I don't want to miss what's the word? Sorry, I'm going on 3 hours of sleep at the moment. We can talk more about that. I don't want to miscredit the person, but they are out there, and I'll probably add this once I can. I believe I took some notes, but they challenged the idea of the run of a show needing to be in a single venue. And so that's exciting because then I can really look at the district and venues around it. And hopefully, especially for folks who, I don't know, if you're like me, are still kind of like having trouble really getting the spoons to people, much less to like go places, especially if you don't have a car. And so I hope that will make my show also accessible to more people and lower the barrier to commuting to get there, if that makes sense.
I love that specific person was talking. That was conversations at the virtual theater summit, and I know you and I have talked about that because I'm also exploring the same. Like what's cool about the welders. It's written into the mission. It's built in by the founders to explore, to like really like push your own bounds. I feel like that is what the six of us are doing in different ways, whether that be the playwriting process, whether that be exploring virtual and adapting to virtual theater, which is what Tishan and Jared did this past year. But I think there's something very cool about like, okay, location and or how I approach the script or who's on, how many people are on stage, and is it solo, and is it storytelling approach, is it dance approach, is it um I think that's like the purpose, right, of like why the welders
Yeah,
even so that it could just be this place to play and explore as theater creators and producers. Yeah.
for sure. And previous cohort members have done shows in non-traditional spaces and non-theater spaces, have done shows over a long run in various venues. So I also don't want to make it seem like I'm the first one to do it. So I want to acknowledge that I am building on the foundation from
Yes.
our previous two cohorts for sure.
I'm glad you said that because and maybe I didn't know. I don't know if people expect this, but I'm like I've never seen a Welders show. I learned about the Welders when I was applying with you all. So I mean, I can say I've never seen. I've seen Jared and Tishawn shows. Seen and heard. Okay, let me take that back. Before we started our tenure as Welders 3.0, I have not seen a show of anyone from the previous cohort. So I think and I just sometimes forget that it's like, oh right, like, and so I'm glad that you said that because to uplift the history of the Welders, in which we're continuing and building upon. So
Yeah.
yes,
Well,
yes.
and in addition to that too, I will say I've probably been watching a lot of stand up online recently too. I do want to get a videographer in the mix to video it and present an online version as well. To be determined how and when and how it would be available and for how long. But I definitely not saying that this is going to be a stand up. I mean, maybe it will. I don't know. Maybe I'll find. I hope to find some humor in it, but I don't want it to necessarily be. The point of it's not going to be to be funny, but hopefully, you'll laugh with me and feel other things when it
And
shows.
you're already kind of like answering it of like what can people, and obviously you have like now until was it halfway through next year, so obviously things are going to grow and change um as they should. What can people like, can you give us the title again of your show, and what can
Sure.
people expect in terms of emotion, in terms of like story, in terms of what you're just speaking on? Yeah, what can audience members and supporters
Sure,
expect?
sure. So with Crossroads, Detours, and Exits, I hope to be able to really explore um, growth over the course of the evening. I hope to be able to provide a snapshot into ways I've grown, and I'm really part of what I'm already beginning to play with some of like the moments of memory that are kind of going to anchor the piece. Um, there, there might be stories that are told twice.
Mm.
Once from the perspective of the person I was when that happened, and then another from the perspective of like the person I've been for the last year to be like, oh, remember that thing I talked about? Here's here's how I'm thinking about it now, right? So I want to make sure that um, you see a different person from the beginning to the end of the show, right? But I also hope to, and I'm trying to figure out how to play with this too, because I'm trying to make sure it's not a I'm not enough, so I need to figure other things out. But I also want to honor not just the land, but also the neighborhoods that I do the show in. So I'm hoping to find some way, especially as someone who grew up in BC, and as someone who's still getting to know my city again. Because when you grow up in an area, unless your parents, and nothing, not going to blame my parents for not doing this, but there's there are things about DC that I never knew before until the last year, right? And so part of it's been an interrogation into my own story, right? I think part of it came from the question, am I the hero of my story?
Hmm.
And so what does that mean, right? And so it's been an interrogation, anything from thinking about the first racist joke I heard when I was in sixth grade to I don't know, I did one of those ancestry DNA things.
Yeah.
And I've shared that in some others meeting. And so like how are the different ways that I'm really like questioning my own story and the story I even told myself, like, oh, here's an example that I'll talk about on the show probably.
Yeah.
Um, for my senior year of high school history class, we were asked to do a kind of biography of someone. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was really leaning into like being mixed and black and Filipino. And so I picked our national hero in the Philippines, Jose Rizal. And so over the last year, when I was like, okay, let me like look back into this national hero thing, and I'm not surprised, but this person was picked while the Philippines was an American territory and was purposely picked because he said nice things. But hold on, let me see if I can read. Da, 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 da. Jose Rizal was an ideal candidate, favorable to the American occupiers since he was dead and non-violent, a favorable quality which, if emulated by Filipinos, would not threaten the American rule or change the status quo of the occupiers. Rizal was selected over Andres Bonifacio, who was viewed too radical, and Apolinario Mabini, who was considered unregenerate. So, like,
Yeah,
even asking myself, what did I think then, and like, are there questions I have that I owe it not just to myself, but like my ancestors to answer, right? I'll probably also be sharing. I mentioned how like going out dancing was the thing, right? Actually, this is I should take notes. This is probably how the show's going to go too. It wasn't really until recently where the kind of music I like to go out to and dance to, and we'll dance until the sun comes up, is like not just like house music, but like Chicago funky groovy house, and like the kind of house that was born out of clubs in the 80s, primarily with queer Black and Latino men. And so that was even an aspect of my, like I said, something that kept me going from week to week, right?
yeah,
It wasn't just any music that could make me move like that. And so even realizing the intersection of identity and community, and realizing like, again, kind of the how the ancestors were with me and I didn't even know it, right?
I
So some
love.
of that, I don't know.
Don't say I don't know. You do know. Let me not yell, but I feel like I could have never. But that's what I do for myself. If I'm talking and I'm like, I don't know, I'll take the blame because you do know. You're talking from a place of like grounded
I
clarity,
receive it. Thank you.
and your ancestors have your back. You know what I mean? It's like it took us on a whole journey. I want to shout out Tishan, fellow welder playwright who's on here on the live. I think Tishan responded to the same thing I did, where when you talked about telling a story multiple times, like that's cool. Like I was like, oh, that's cool. Like I didn't even think about that, which is cool about this being in the same space as fellow playwrights because we all are just doing things uniquely to ourselves, and it's always fascinating. Like I can always hear about anyone's project, and it's so I'm like excited to hear more and more about what you're doing and how you're approaching it. um I feel like I have one more question. I do have one more because the words you kept repeating the word ceremonial when you were talking about your journey starting off in piano and then singing, and so I'm interested in what is the ceremony and ritual about like what you are creating. And I feel like you may have already put it into the atmosphere and into the space, but I just kind of want to formulate that question. What is the ceremony and ritual about you, solo storyteller on stage?
Right. I think part of it will be the time before and the time after the show.
Mm.
Um, if people just come to the show, I understand. But one thing that I loved about doing the storytelling show with local Burning Man attendees for 4 years at Fringe was the ritual of gathering after the show, not just for people in the audience to meet the storytellers, but
Yeah.
then to share their own stories. And so the show wasn't the end, but the beginning of a conversation, which is also storytelling. I believe is at the root of relationships and community. Like how do we get to know each other? We tell stories about ourselves.
Oh, I gotta dance. I don't even have words. Love that. Oh, I love that. I love that, and I miss that. Yes, yes. The storytelling as the beginning. I love. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I, I mean, if I could find venues that then could like have a mini dance party for like an hour or so after, maybe I DJ or not, like that would actually be like ideal for people to like just be together. Because like ultimately, every show isn't just a microcosm of community. For the hour or two or three we're together, we are community, right? We're our own community. We are the community of the people who showed up. Also acknowledging anyone who isn't there, right? And I think that's one thing I want to be mindful of my show, especially because I really part of the imposter syndrome is I'm worried by really being explicit about not just being queer, but being mixed, being black, and
Mm.
I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to identify myself as less than black, right? Or other than black, because I'm black. And so I really hope that in the intersectionality of my identity, and I don't know if there might be some like call and response, or there might be opportunities for people to raise their hand or self-identify, but I'm hoping I can figure out if you don't like audience participation, this isn't that. But I'm hoping I can provide moments for the people in the room to get to know each other as well. Whether that happens during the show or before and or after, we'll find out. That'll be part of it. But I don't want people to think that they just came by themselves or with their date or whatever, and they just happen to be in a full room of strangers, right? Even if people don't talk to everyone else, um, and even though I'm going to be talking about me, and I think my biggest challenge is I want it to be about us,
Yes.
and I want to be of service to community.
I don't know why. It's not surprise, but I just in this moment I am realizing how much in alignment what we do is, and I think I feel like I'm always learning that, but hearing you like articulate and going into more depth, I'm like, oh, we're doing the same thing.
Yeah, we are.
Which like it makes sense because community engagement, but I think it's like, oh, we're doing the same, like not, and I shouldn't even say the same thing. It's the
Yeah,
same gathering spaces and values because it's like, I think that yeah, that's been my biggest, that is my biggest and will be my biggest thing now, and then leaving or not leaving, but I don't know what the term is. The not leaving, but the welders, our season. I don't know. It's not season. Our cohort, our time, our tenure ending is that it's yeah, it's that before and the after. It's the space. It's the spaces. It's the physical location. It's the spiritual location. It's like all of these spaces. Like what kind of space do I want my play to create? I feel like that's the beauty of the power of the producer is like, what do I want the show itself to create and reverberate in the lobby after the show? The pre-show this, the post-show this, the dance party, it's all of that, those things, and it becomes this whole experience that hopefully creates belonging. I feel like that's what you're talking about, belonging. So we're not just a bunch of strangers in a city, a bunch of strangers in the grocery store, but theater as that connective tissue for those couple hours, so
yeah,
you're less alone because we're all changing, growing, looking inside, losing, grieving, happy. Like we're all doing all of that, and like, how do we remind ourselves as human beings that we're not alone in it? Woo, I'm getting emotional.
yeah. Do you mind if I
Woo.
share? I was looking off because I wanted to pull some definitions of community that I came across during my grad school work that have really been kind of core and fundamental to how. And I think they build on each other, even though like I came across them separately in different source documents. So the first being, and you pretty much almost said this, a community is a collection of people who interact together in the same environment, interactions which produce feelings of belonging. So to build community, we seek conversations where people show up by invitation rather than mandate and experience an intimate and authentic relatedness. The social fabric of community is formed from an expanding shared sense of belonging. It is shaped by the idea that only when we are connected and care for the well-being of the whole, that a civil and democratic society is created.
Yes,
So I want people to feel that.
yes, that's a beautiful definition, and I love. It actually reminds me of, so for those who do not know, the Welders, when the founders created the Welders, the name of the Welders comes from a poem by Sherry Moraga, and like the poem also has, just in metaphor, because welding is about fire and steel and two elements coming together. So it's a beautiful poem. Definitely recommend you Google it and look it up. The
And it's
Welders.
on our website.
Oh, it's on our website too. Also, yeah, go to our website. I'm just laughing at myself. Go to our website, yes. The Welder by Sherry Moraga on the Welder .org website. Is that the name of our website?
It is. And if you go to the
Thank
history,
the Welders. I'm just like, is DC in it? I don't know. The
no,
Welders. Thank
it
you,
is
chief.
on our social though, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's Welders DC. But yeah, if you go to our website, go to the history link in the about section. It's there.
Because yeah, and I didn't realize like, I mean, I didn't realize. I'm realizing now like that definition of community, which I love, and I also want to get from you.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, it's like the poem is like that embodiment in this metaphor of what welders physically do, those who actually like weld with fire and metal, not welders, playwrights. So I'm now realizing the beautiful synergy of like the metaphor of who and what the welder playwright is, as well as the definition of community. And I think, yeah, belonging, like it's really, and it makes me think of different theater experiences where I have felt belonging, not because I knew the people, but because of the laughter. I feel like it was typically at Black plays, because that's like when it's done in alignment, I'll say it can feel like it feels like homecoming. It feels like reunion. So definitely like laughing with people. It's so intimate, or like crying with people. And I don't think I didn't think I'd think about theater in that way. That like, oh, I'm crying with people essentially. So just like I cry with my friends, or I cry with these people I trust. I'm may cry with people in the theater. I'm laughing with people, and those are forms of intimacy. Those are real forms of exchange that happen, whether or not we're meeting. So like, how can we uplift that even more and support that more with community engagement, with lobby, with display, with ticketing, with with the seating, with all of these different like physical business elements to create just a constant space of belonging and create more accessibility, because I know that
Yep.
I mean, the theater industry needs a lot of work in a lot of places, and I know, speaking as an able-bodied person, there's a lot more we need to do to bring in accessibility in terms of for more people to be able to get to the theater and be able to experience it. So yeah, how can we just I feel like that's what, to me, that's the responsibility of theater. It's like, how could theater be I don't want to speak about theater as a overall. How can my theater like be a part of the the justice and accessibility and the deconstruction of racism and transphobia and homophobia? Like, how could it be that in the physical and emotional space that is being created?
Yeah.
Uh, that's my part of my ethos.
Uh, that
Theater.
that reminds me of another formative memory and me thinking that I wasn't good enough for local theater before I got into storytelling. Um, so I'd mentioned I did several kind of devised ensemble pieces for Fringe. One was like a homage to like the local rave scene, and did that in 2010, I believe. And then in 2011, I did a piece. It was a mixed cast of a couple of other Filipino performers, amateurs and pros, and then non-Filipino, and addressed this kind of tragedy that my family dealt with. Actually, today's the 11th year anniversary of that, and I'm definitely going to talk about it in the show.
Mm.
And so for me, what was affirming, I'll say this first, was that I had Filipino friends, including my mom and friends of hers, that came to see the show and don't normally see theater, candidly, and and they saw themselves, and they saw things that it was dealing with how Filipino American communities do and don't talk about mental illness, which I'm sure a lot of other communities and also can relate to.
Yeah.
So it was also like, oh, this is kind of like providing permission
Yeah.
to kind of talk about this on a personal level. We didn't
Yeah.
sell out. I wasn't worried about that. My goal was to create stories for people to see themselves on stage, and I think I did that. But the thing that I unfortunately internalized, I think, was one of the reviews. And
Mm.
again, this is the only thing I remember. I could probably Google the whole thing, but the thing I remember was the person basically was like, JR as the lead playwright, but like everyone but JR, the show could do with um, sh- more show, less tell, right? Like there's too much talking, there's too much storytelling. I was like, oh, I guess I'm not a good playwright if I'm not doing it right, right? But then I think again that's another reason I found a home in storytelling because it is just telling our story, right? And it is I think it's one of the I believe one of the oldest performative
Yeah.
art forms that we have, sitting around a fire, right, telling stories to each other.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I want to tap into that too, right? And that
Yeah.
in addition to community, I would love for maybe not everybody, but if there are people who come to see the show and they think that and they know that they are enough to tell their own story, whether it's on stage, whether it's at work the next day, whether it's to their family, um, that would be great.
Yeah. I like that you're going. Yeah, it reminds me of like what is it? It's like the thing that makes us. It's like the thing that makes us unique, the thing that makes us feel like we're alone, or the thing that makes us feel like we have to go. That's where the magic is. So it's like that person didn't get it because I feel like when I talk to you, I'm learning. I'm learning like oh just be on stage, no metaphor, no like I've never, but like that's different. It's different than me creating a choreo poem dance piece. That's not they're not the same thing. Someone standing telling a story and then putting that in theater form is not the same thing as writing out dialogue of two characters
Right.
in a world. Like it's just it's not it's just, we're in the world of theater, but it's not the same thing, and so that person didn't get it, and so I think that I feel like that makes sense of why you brought up like stand up because I don't know a lot about stand up comedy. I saw stand up comic in college, and after seeing his whole set, I was like, oh my god, they're storytellers. Or I guess when it's done well, I don't know. I don't know, but I didn't realize how much comedians were storytellers. So I feel like you are going to be, I guess, like not educated, but yeah, just like showing a lot of people who are in theater just a different lens and approach to things that we all do because stand up, storytelling. It's like those are specifically crafted
Yeah.
things. That's where you're diving into, and then I wonder how much our communications and what we share about your show so that people understand like that's where you're meeting that's where we're meeting you, what I
Yeah.
mean? You're inviting us and we're meeting you in a world of storytelling,
Yeah.
so
Well, and
yeah.
and yes, Tishan, absolutely. Storytelling is the root of theater. I had mentioned one of my mentors, who had passed away, John Kevin Boggs, but I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to the Story District community in general, who really provided a foundation for me to find the voice I had. And also, I just wanted to mention some other really formative inspirations who I consider lucky to have seen perform and taken notes or just been inspired by. Amy Sedman, definitely one of them. Reggie Kubiko, Molly Kelly, VJ Nathan, Ann Thomas, who's also passed away, and then Sean and Kathy Baird Westfall. There's such a rich community of storytellers here. And that's the other thing that was fascinating because we were pretty much almost sold out every show that we did when I was on the board of Story District. And so
Mm,
I found the community, and even though it wasn't theater, it was theatrical. Um, and people would show up an hour and a half just to grab a good seat and to get food from the food, right? So like,
yeah,
I would be lying if I said I didn't want to recreate some of that magic that I found there. That I think
I love that.
people just want and need, especially folks who've moved here who are looking for community.
Yeah.
As one of the 33% of residents who were born and raised here, like I hope this is a place for lifelong residents and longtime residents and new residents can also come and get to know each other. Um, but it's still going to be about me.
That-
I need to get more comfortable with that. I said that jokingly. I'm laughing because I feel so uncomfortable saying that out loud.
I understood your humor. I understood it. You know, I hope the folks understood it. I love it. I say my theater. I think I reclaimed what people are when they're like, create the, I don't know, at some point they were like, create the work for people. And I'm like, my art is for me first. And then I get a team to help me like then get it ready for an audience. And then, but it's about inviting people into my healing. So I feel like that's what it is for me.
Right.
So I understand that point of view, and I'm like, it makes sense for me. I can't decide someone else, but I'm like, it makes sense that I'm creating my art for my healing because I'm like, because it's my life, it's my journey. But it doesn't mean that every moment is decided by me or is me at the center. But it is for CC, and then
Yeah.
I, with training and craft, expanding it, which is like, which is to me makes a lot of sense. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, I think oh, geez. I want to say, I'm just going to say it. We're geeking or whatever. I'm just
Yeah,
going to tap into my inner cishet white man and just like,
tap into that. I know why people say that, but I don't want to tap into them. Where they're like, no, because they don't got the strength I have.
yeah.
I know why people say it though. I know what you mean, but I'm
Oh,
like,
we are at time. Thanks for the check, Tisha. We're just, no, I say that jokingly. That is,
came up with
I'm going to explore that in my show. And so if you want to see where I land with that, you'll just have to come see the show in May.
a shout out. I see you, Naeem. I see you, Micah. Thanks for joining us. Okay, we are theater. Yes, we are theater major. Yes, thanks for joining us, y'all. Thanks for joining us.
If you did just join us, we're going to be uploading this video to Facebook and YouTube, so you can catch the whole thing.
Yeah.
And we'll probably do this again.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So just we are the Welders. We are playwrights based in DC. We are a collective. We are producers. We are playwrights, storytellers, creators. And we want to remind you today is Tuesday, right? Today's Tuesday, right? I'm not bugging
Giving
out.
Tuesday, not just any Tuesday.
Tuesday. I thought we were on a different day of the week. Today's Giving Tuesday, and we just want to invite folks, if you have the means, the way, the funds, to invest into us, the Welders, or share our website, our Instagram page. A share of a page or a website, it goes a long way because community is abundant, community is powerful. So if you really, would like to share, that is helping us for real. If you share
Yep.
with your friends, share with people you know who love theater, who love storytelling, who love seeing Black people invest into art and storytelling and healing. But yes, please donate funds as much or as little as you can. We appreciate every dollar, every penny. Truly, we are 6 individuals operating a full 501c3 theater organization, but it's not our full time job. So it's a lot of hard work,
It
and
isn't.
the funds
Feels like it's.
the funds really support us. So we want to
Yeah.
invite you to be in community with us and exchange an energy by giving to us.
Yeah. And
On
and if I
has the link in for our Giving Tuesday donations. Thank you, Tisha.
And if I could, you're not going to have to wait until May to see the show to interact with us again. In addition to another Instagram Live, keep an eye out. I'm just, spoiler alert, game nights, dance parties, sing alongs.
Joy.
2022 is going to be a good time to just be together, y'all.
Yes. Thank you, Micah. So much love. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you.
being here. Thank you. Thank y'all for being here. Thank you, Tisha. Shout out to Tisha, fellow welder playwright, for
Thank
dropping.
you.
Thank you. This has been so much fun. Yay.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.